Thank you very much. Very difficult to follow on from such a brilliant presentation. Thank you very, very much. And I also want to say congratulations to Ellen and the Bond Institute team. About 10 years ago, I think at least, I made a documentary for the BBC about constructive journalism. And it was seen as a bit of a cranky thing, but mainstream journalists were well aware that something was going badly wrong. Your daughter has spotted it as well. It's wonderful to see a decade on that we've got this incredible program that you've put together here, and that so many people are present and interested in it. So well done. You may be thinking, I don't think you came to this conference particularly to talk about technology, right? You came here to talk about journalism, about how you can be more engaged and effective and constructive in your craft. So why talk about AI? Well, in a minute, I'm going to present the latest results from our survey, which is actually going to be published next week. So you're getting a kind of exclusive access to it. And I hope that will give you a sense of what people in news organizations are doing around the world with this bundle of technologies that we call AI, and especially the new ones, the mentioned ChatGTP, that we call generative AI as well. And I hope it will give you a sense of the opportunities, but also the risks, and generally how it's playing out in the world. And then afterwards, we've got this session where we're going to focus in a bit more on the actual use of AI in newsrooms. But why should you care? Well, here's some reasons why I think you should care about AI in your work. Firstly, you're already using it. If you do a Google search, well, you're using a form of machine learning AI in your work. And you're going to be using it a lot more. I promise you. You're going to be using it a lot more. And as you'll see from the survey, a lot of people are using it already. The other reason is because other people are going to be using it. And they are using it already. And they are perhaps not so concerned about some of the problems with this. They just want to get the clickbait. They just want to get the cheap, automated content out there. They perhaps even want to promote bad content, propaganda, hate speech, and false disinformation. And they're going to be super good at it. So if you don't use the same technologies to improve the reach and effectiveness and efficiency of your journalism, then the good journalism is going to once again fall behind. And journalism, without an audience, without engagement, is basically a form of, onanism is the polite word of putting it. We all want to have an impact on society. And the other reason why you should be taking an interest in AI is because it's a new subject for you. It can be a specific subject, a kind of algorithmic accountability journalism, that we must be taking a critical, independent view of some of the problems around AI and how it's being created, and the costs of it, environmental costs, human costs of the creation of AI, and of course its impact. So it doesn't matter which bit of journalism you cover. It doesn't matter whether you do health reporting, political reporting, education reporting, environmental reporting. All of those fields, I promise you, are going to be increasingly impacted by AI technologies. It's happening right now in every single field. So to report upon those subjects, whether you're going to do it in a constructive way or whether you're going to do it in a horrible clickbait commercial way, you will need to know about AI. Just a quick short advert, we can help with that. My project, the JournalismAI project, which of course is funded by our friends at the Google News Initiative. We have to edit that bit out. Our project's been running for 5 years. Basically, I'm a journalist and then became a professor. And for the last 15 years, I've been looking at the future of news. So, the going online thing. and then the social media thing and the whole digitalization. And about 5 years ago, we started this project because I was convinced that AI is, if you like, the third wave of technological change. And I was right. And over this time, we have created a network of 7,000 people around the world, and we have provided online free training and information, a whole bunch of case studies. We're running email newsletter courses that you can do to discover AI. We've created an AI starter pack where you can explore the whole issues. We do an academy for small newsrooms in different parts of the world where people can do real courses with experts and mentors. And we have an innovation program called the CoLab Fellowships, where people from different news organizations come together to spend 6 months exploring a particular aspect of AI in journalism. So it's all online. You can go and look at it, enjoy it, and perhaps sign up and be part of our community. We started this project back in 2018 by doing a big survey. That's what you do. Doing a big survey to say, well, what is actually happening out there? And what do people think about AI? What are the problems? What are the opportunities? What are the trends that we should be aware of? And that was the basis for all our work. And now we revisited it literally a few months ago. We've been doing the research, and it's a sort of big line. I'll explain that now to you. And I hope that will give you a sense of what's happening with AI and why it matters. Sorry, these are new slides. I only saw them yesterday, so I need to look at them as well. This is how we did the survey. It doesn't claim to be representative. You can't have a representative survey of global media. It's impossible. If anybody says they've done it, a lie. But this is a selection of people, mainly organizations that are interested in AI. So it's a bit of a distorted sample, but loads of them in lots of different countries. And I just turned it off. There we go. The responses, were from all around the world, because we're a global organisation with an LSE, with the London School of Economics, but we're global. And we went to lots of different types of organisations. We didn't want to just do a kind of digital native or big organisations. Lots of, I just now spotted a spelling mistake. News agency. It's a good job I'm doing this rehearsal. Next week I'm going to have to do this for real. So how are newsrooms using AI? And this is a really important point. That first of all, you can see it's going up. There's a lot more usage, but the important point of this chart is that it's in all parts of the news process. Okay? It's not just content creation. The debate around ChatGTP has been all about, can it write an article as brilliantly as I write an article? And that in many ways is the least important part of this. The much more important part, I think, will be how it's used in gathering information, tracking sources and so on, and in news production certainly, but not press a button and there's an article. It will be, and I talk to people, they use it in editing video. They use it in coding, for example. They use it in scraping across social media to try and find out what's going on. So very much more, and I don't mean to be offensive to interns, but it's like a really clever intern who is there to help you doing your job, and they don't need coffee. Do they foresee more use of AI in their newsrooms? Yes, of course they do. Massively, the people we talked to saw that in these four main areas, fact-checking and disinformation analysis really important, content personalization and automation, hugely important. One of the problems that we face with audiences that are sick of news is that there's just too much of it, and you keep bombarding me with all sorts of news. Because do you know the people who avoid the news the most? It's the people who actually like the news the most. The people who consume the most news are the ones that, turn it off. I can't stand it anymore. So we're actually putting off the people who care most about what we do. And so optimizing content, giving people stuff that's more relevant and in a format that suits their behavior and their habits and their needs is so much more important than creating more and more and more content, because that will just overwhelm them. And AI can help with that. It's very good at doing text summarization and generation. And it's very good at reformatting what you've done. It likes doing that. That's quite simple. Don't ask it to write, a sort of Tolkien saga. It will be weird. It'd be weird. But ask it to do more simple tasks on a set of data, and it'll be good. And then, using it in imaginative ways like chatbots to conduct interviews and to try and gauge public sentiment on issues. So lots of different use cases. Did people have a strategy, we asked them, to deal with this? And I would argue very strongly that you do. Whether even you're an individual journalist, but certainly if you're a news organization, you should have a strategic approach, especially to generative AI. And I'll talk about that in a second. And as you can see, most of them didn't. Most of them did, because actually having a strategy involves sitting down and thinking ahead. And news organizations, generally speaking, are not terribly good at that. But encouragingly, people were getting better at thinking about how that will happen. And I've observed by talking to a lot of newsrooms that they are trying to put in place some kind of process to deal with generative AI and not just as kind of random panic. And that's partly because they've learned from previous iterations of technological change. And it very much depends, obviously, on the size of the organizations. These are the most pressing challenges for AI integration in the newsroom. This is the obstacles, if you like, that people face when they see all this stuff out there. They think, oh my God, we should be doing it. What's stopping them doing it? Well, the most obvious one is the technical challenges and financial constraints. They see, especially actually old-fashioned AI, as rather complicated, a bit of a kind of black box. And even generative AI, it looks, in a way, it's very easy. That's the big difference. Anybody can use ChatGTP. You just put in a prompt, can't you? You don't have to be trained to do it. But actually using it effectively in a newsroom is a technical challenge. Of course, it's a financial challenge because you have to have the time, you have to have the people, you have to have the space in your schedule to experiment with it and to do the research, and then to work out how it's going to work in context. But they also mention very strongly ethical challenges around this, and come to those. Cultural challenges, and by that I mean the attitude of people in the workforce, which can be, wow, this is amazing. I'm now 80% more efficient when I do my video editing. Or it might be, oh my God, is this going to take my job? Generally speaking, the answer to that one is, yes, it will take your job if your job involves very routine, banal, repetitive journalistic labor. It probably will take over that. And that might be a good thing. If it does the boring stuff, that it may allow you to do the more constructive human work. And the other problem at the end there was managerial challenges. And I think a lot of managers answered this. That's why it's quite a small percentage. But in a sense, the challenge is totally about management. It's about how do you manage the process of change. So personally, I would put that rather higher. And here's a quote from one of our regional researchers. The respondents raised this financial imperative of the challenges when it comes to adoption. Most of the AI, this is especially for the Global South, most of the AI tools are imported, and with African media markets facing economic pressure, there has been hesitancy with investing in AI tools. I think just about everyone in this room is from one of the wealthiest parts of the world, even if you're from Australia or Belgium, you're from, or even the UK. I mean, you think the UK is in a mess, but we've still got a lot more resource than many parts of the world. I think that's really important to remember. You think it's tough to deal with all these technologies, but you are the absolutely privileged elite. So yeah, about half of the newsrooms said that they weren't ready for generative AI. And it'd be amazing if they were, frankly, because it's less than a year since ChatGPT was unleashed. And as you know, all these technologies were unleashed much too early. And they were doing that because of commercial rivalry. They were so keen to get it out there and get ahead of their rivals, Microsoft versus Google, etc. And so they are in effect in beta. They're part of an experiment, and we can see how rapidly they've been adopted by people, billions of people using them, but also how they've changed. So I don't know if anybody's used something like DALL-E or Midjourney, the image creation thing. When you were using that back in January, it was like a kid's painting, wasn't it? It was totally, the googly eyes, 6 fingers on each hand, all that kind of stuff. Now it's stunningly impressive and incredibly convincing. And in a way, that's very worrisome. So it's not surprising, frankly, that people aren't ready. It'd be a miracle if they were. And I won't go into the detail on all of this, partly because of time, but also because you'll all be able to read the report next week in detail. So I don't want to bog the thing down with too much of the detail. How can you prepare? Well, the first thing is training and skills and technologies. And this does not mean that you have to suddenly become super proficient in, for example, coding. I mean, one of the points of this technology is you do not need to do coding. When we're talking about skills and training, we're really just talking about aptitude. Learning how to prompt well is partly just something that you'll do through experience and trial and error. But there is a lot of advice out there that can help you to develop a better way of prompting. So obviously that's a really, really important thing. I'll come over this side of the stage by this lovely tree. So how would newsroom... It's quite nice, actually, yeah. How would newsrooms prepare for AI technology integration? Well, it's interesting to compare the reports. In the past, they talked a lot about AI literacy, just understanding what the hell it is. And I think that's still very important because there's been so much kind of hype coverage about extermination of the human race, or the opposite, that we're all going to work 2-day weeks because it will do all the work for us. And that's all rubbish, of course. And I think it's really interesting that the focus this year is very much more sophisticated, thinking much more about multidisciplinary, cross-department training to enhance, this is a dreadful phrase, enhance interoperability, But I think that just shows that people are much more conscious of how sophisticated this is. And people are playing with it everywhere in newsrooms that I talk to. Some of them have rushed to use it to publish directly, and almost all of those are screwed up because there are deficiencies within the AI. It's just not good enough yet. Perhaps it won't ever be, but everyone is experimenting with it. And I think that's really, really healthy. And if you're not, then you should be. And as you can see, they're doing it in all sorts of different ways. Some of them is generating content. Others have said, no, do not use it to generate content. But let's experiment with other things that we can do. For example, data extraction, really important. Everyone is convinced, well, pretty much everyone is convinced, apart from that 1%. I'd love to know who the 1% was actually, who thinks it doesn't present new opportunities. It absolutely does. But people have concerns, and that's why experimentation is good, but caution is also sensible. We still need verification. In this sense, I think it's kind of common sense. All the things that you apply to your journalism that make it authentic, accurate, reliable, believable, realistic, etc. All those techniques you use, like double sourcing, for example, or editing. Remember editing? All these things are really good ways to make sure that your journalism is responsible and usable. Well, the same thing applies to all these technologies as well. But there were lots of specific concerns. Some of them are around the actual technology itself, issues like algorithmic bias, which is not, of course, exclusive to journalism. It's in any form of AI. Then thinking more about, what's the consequences for journalistic values like transparency, accountability, and accuracy? Transparency is an interesting one. How much do you have to tell your user about your use of AI? Do you have to say, oh, this article was made with the help of generative AI? Do you do that at the moment? Do you say, I use news agency copy for this? Or actually, I've got the idea from another blog? You don't, do you? So I think it's an interesting way of thinking about what we really mean by transparency. Obviously, there's issues around the idea of further commercialization of journalism and disinformation, and what Ellen mentioned about, the decline in public trust. Personally, I don't think it'll have a big impact on public trust. I think public trust is all about the journalism that's produced. I don't think the public care deeply whether it's produced by a machine or by a human being in many instances, as long as it's effective journalism. And then it is all happening very, very quickly, and people are worried that their newsroom can't cope, can't be sustainable. How do they approach it? This is how they're saying they're trying to approach it. And again, I think it's refreshing that people have thought through a lot of these ethical issues about trying to be more transparent. Here's a really good one. Do some guidelines, do some ethical guidelines, do some practical guidelines that will help the people working for you, your staff, but also will send a signal to your audience that you're aware of the risks and you're taking measures to counter them. 40% of them said that their approach to AI technology in the newsroom hasn't changed much, but that's often because they're still working on it. People are still coping with the first wave of AI technology adoption, and then generative AI is coming along. And this is an iterative process. And again, news organizations aren't very good at this. Other organizations are better at putting in place systems which then develop and evolve over time. And certainly that's going to be something that's going to happen with generative AI. That any system you build, any tool that you use this year or next year will definitely change the year after. So this is a continuous process. The merry-go-round of technological change is not going to stop for some time. The divide, I think, is really important. One of the things we shifted in with our project generally has been much more to the so-called Global South, which I find a kind of problematic label, but you kind of know what I mean. And that's partly because we're very much conscious of the gap in resources, but we're also incredibly excited by the people that we've worked with in the Global South and the innovation that they've shown and the commitment and so on. So there is definitely a sense that the benefits are accruing most rapidly to richer organizations in the so-called global north. And that's got to, we can go on about all the other factors that make it tough to be a journalist in most places in the world. And frankly, it's always been tough, and AI is not going to solve that. It's not going to get rid of authoritarian governments, for example. You have that problem around infrastructure as well in many of these regions, that the wonderful internet that we assume in places like Germany, the fantastic access to server space, even electricity. I was in South Africa the other day, fantastic country, constant power breakdown. So that's the kind of reality of it. And also most of these tools are made by, Californian-based or London-based AI companies with Western English speakers in mind. And you're all conscious of I'm sure you're all aware of the algorithmic bias inherent in this. So lots of specific problems for people in the Global South, and there's a real danger that gap can be expanded. And that's not good for anybody trying to do any kind of journalism, let alone constructive journalism, outside of the global north. Again, I'm going to rush through this a little bit because this is more about, the differences between the two surveys. And in many ways, there was a lot of continuity. you can see quite a lot of similarities, and that's because these technologies may be subtly different, but they present very similar challenges to news organizations. And the fact that the technology companies are so dominant in the provision of the infrastructure and the tools, of course, that hasn't changed. One thing that might have changed on that particular issue is that there are more technological companies involved. It's not just one company creating generative AI. So in that sense, there's a kind of healthy competition which kind of opens up potential opportunities for the news industry to negotiate better terms. The report, as I said, is much more diverse. We focus much more on how people are trying to come up with better strategies within the newsroom. The big message was that generative AI is much more accessible than AI technologies. And that, in a sense, enables people who do have less resource. To do conventional AI, you had to build quite big systems, very expensive, laborious. You had to hire people who were super clever. Now you can be much more creative. The barriers to that creativity are much lower. So, very quickly, what should you do about this if you're a news organization, or even, I think, as an individual? Get yourself informed. You don't have to, read 10 books, but just go on our website and just poke around there for a few hours. Broaden AI literacy within the whole news organization, right through from whatever you have, marketing, audiences, editorial, management, and anybody else, frankly, because it's going to impact on everyone's work. Assign responsibility. Tell somebody, or a group of people ideally, that they need to get across generative AI and AI in general. Keep abreast of the developments, start to identify possible use cases and so on. And then when you do, the usual thing about testing, iterating and repeating, and probably doing it at small scale at first. Draw up guidelines, because I promise you that somebody in your organization will be using these tools, even if you don't know about it. So draw up guidelines, but also draw up systems where people do share their experience and evaluation of the technologies, which might be, oh my God, do not use that tool, it's terrible. Or it might be, hey, I've got this fantastic thing, it really helps me to identify photos much more quickly. And in that sense, collaboration is internal, but also, of course, externally. And I mean by that, talk to organizations like me, there's lots of others coming along, partnership on AI and so on, and network like mad, which of course you're doing over the next couple of days. Network like mad, because again, one of the things I've observed that's changed in the last few years is that news organizations, which used to be famously isolated and competitive and reluctant to share information or ask questions, are now, because of necessity, frankly, much more prepared to do that. And so there's loads of networks that you can exploit. So there's the key findings, that we are seeing loads of rapid experimentation and incorporation of Gen AI, that there is, again, this continual debate, if you like, about the ethical implications of integration of AI or any technology and whatever your journalistic values are. And obviously AI adoption is unevenly distributed, and there is this need for transparency and collaboration. Yeah, got to the end. There's the details. So I would say that the last thought I'll put with you, which is a kind of optimistic thought, which is, yeah, right, be worried about some of the implications of this. Be thoughtful about some of the risks of using these technologies. But here, I think, is the potential prize, that these technologies can take away some of the work, make you more efficient. And in a world where a lot of the more basic journalism is being created by machines, if you use that time to create more human-centered journalism, more constructive journalism, that's got more research, that's got more reporting, got more real witnessing, then you are going to stand out. So there's the paradox. The technology itself may enable you to create more human-centered, human-related journalism. Thank you very much.